On this week's episode of Dollars and Cents, we're going to talk a little bit about the new rules of home buying. Maybe you've seen these articles. There was a big settlement by the National Realtors Association that is fundamentally going to change a lot of how we buy homes after June. So we're going to talk about that and what it means to you. Plus, have you ever bought something and then kind of like regretted it? You know, like maybe it was a piece of clothing or some shoes or whatever the case may be, and you buy it and you think it's great, and then you just kind of regret it and you never use it. Well, there are some purchases that could actually undermine your finances and your retirement if you do those at the wrong time as well. So we're going to talk about some of the purchases that you may wind up regretting, probably more than just that shirt that you bought that you didn't like, particularly as a retiree. So that's what we got on tap for this week's episode of Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. We've been doing it now for 40 years, or at least the program's been on the air for 40 years. I've been doing it for 25 of those, along with, before me, it was my father-in-law, then it was me, and now I get the opportunity from time to time to bring in any of our certified financial fiduciaries at Nelson Financial Planning to co-host with me. This time of year, it's a little busy around the office. We do tax preparation work, as our clients know, a service that we offer exclusively for our clients. So it's a little busy, so it's hard to pull folks in to co-host a radio show. So it's just me this week on the program. My name, of course, is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning, where we got a team of certified financial fiduciaries along with a number of CPAs who join us as well at Nelson Financial Planning, where we help you make good decisions with your finances. So with that, we will begin the program. You know, we've been talking a little bit about AI and sort of its importance to efficiency and productivity, particularly to companies, which in our view, as we've talked about on prior shows, is contributing a lot to sort of the upward trend in the overall markets these days, to the overall sort of economic growth picture. And when we talk about that, we thought on the program today, we would kind of delve into some examples so you can see the widespread implications of what it is that we are talking about. So think of this sort of AI term, this artificial intelligence sort of umbrella, if you will, as what seems to be the next significant technological development, right? So if you think back over the course of the past 40 years, it's like these things happen every 10 or 15 years, right? So 40 years ago, it was the advent of the computer, right? So that made things much easier in terms of processing, organizing, and then from that, you fast forward 10 or 15 years, and then the internet becomes much more widespread, much more ubiquitous, and the internet then allows for all those computers to sort of connect to each other. Fast forward again another 10 or 15 years, and you've got cell phones, right? And cell phones allow all of us to connect with each other much more closely. And of course, through the power of information, now that power of information is in your handheld device, courtesy of your cell phone. And then I guess I would liken this next thing, if you will, artificial intelligence and sort of the things that go with that, as the one that sort of pulls that all together, right? And really increases efficiency, connectivity, and the speed with which tasks are done. And the example that I always use when I'm talking with folks, because this one is pretty close to home. And that's the tax preparation software that we actually use at Nelson Financial Planning. And as you know, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, if you're a client of Nelson Financial Planning, you have the opportunity to take advantage of our tax preparation services. We have a number of folks who are full-time employees, one's an IRS enrolled agent, other one's a CPA, that are also certified financial fiduciaries. And then we have some other folks that are CPAs that work with us during the course of tax season. And so a couple of years ago, we changed our software, sort of went through an upgrade of that software that we use for tax preparation, and sort of the latest and greatest. And this software really gives you an understanding or a perspective on ways in which artificial intelligence and sort of that general term sort of creeps into a lot of different industries that we think is really one of the biggest reasons why we're seeing the profitability and the productivity and the efficiency that is helping to drive the market, particularly of late. So here's what the software does. So you give us your tax documents, we take your tax documents, we scan them in, and the software reads the document, reads the numbers on the document, reads the type of document that it is, and then takes that and puts that into the tax return where it needs to be. So if it's like a 1099-R, that's retirement distributions, it goes into that line on the 1040 inside the software. And that, folks, that's an example of artificial intelligence, right? Because it's not a person that is reading that tax form. It is a software. It is a computer-oriented device that is reading that and ultimately taking the numbers and putting them where they need to be. Now, let's be clear. This software does not spell the end of CPAs and tax preparers around the country, because you still need that human on the back end to really make sure that things are where they kind of should be, and to use that human knowledge at the end to really make sure that things are as they should be on that return. But if you stop and think about it, one of the biggest time-consuming factors to preparing a tax return from a professional point of view is all the data entry, right? And so you got a lot of numbers that go into that tax return. Well, if you've got software or artificial intelligence driven software that reads those documents, right, then and puts the numbers in, then you don't have to have a person doing that. So which is faster, a computer putting 100 numbers in or a person? Well, the computer is going to certainly beat that any day of the week. So that is what is happening, and a good example of sort of the artificial intelligence use, even just in the very simple example of what we're doing right now at the office in terms of tax preparation. The other thing that it does is, if you think back to the way that tax returns were typically done, where it was very heavy on data entry, the key piece there is that that's where the greatest potential for errors are, right? So you can make a 6 a 9, a 9 a 6, you miss a decimal point, and that's where a lot of the mistakes happen when it comes to a tax return. So if you have a technology solution that sort of eliminates those human errors of data input, well, then guess what? You wind up being much more accurate and certainly much more efficient. So that's just a good example of how AI even creeps into what we do at our office on a regular basis, particularly during tax preparation season. We got a couple of examples that we wanted to share with you, because I thought it was kind of a little bit of an interesting topic. Hopefully you agree, to chat through a little bit here on this morning's program here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. We'll be back after these messages. So we're talking a little bit about artificial intelligence today. It's a concept that you hear thrown around all the time, but our theory is that artificial intelligence represents a big improvement in efficiency and productivity that you're seeing contributing to the continued market improvement and economic growth that we're seeing in the country and the world at large. And much like sort of computers before it, and then the internet, and then cell phones, AI, that general category, is showing itself in ways that you would not necessarily think, oh, that's artificial intelligence. The example that we were giving before the break is the tax preparation software that we use at Nelson Financial Planning that literally takes the documents, reads it, puts it in the return. Still need a human at the end to make sure that everything is where it needs to be. But at the end of the day, that's obviously a lot more efficient. That's a lot more accurate. And that increases productivity across the board. So just one example of artificial intelligence, because it's a computer or software that is taking the document, reading the information, and then doing something with it that quantifies it as kind of that artificial intelligence. But the examples in different parts and different areas are also pretty interesting to just show you how broad this reach has been. I mean, obviously it's self-evident in the world of technology, right? Beyond kind of these chat bots, that is where I think it's probably one of the places where it's most widely used, where if you're going on a website and you've got a question, right, and the little chat thing pops up, and then you can kind of engage back and forth in that. It's not very engaging at this point, but the reality is that that's where a lot of that artificial intelligence is used that we encounter on a regular basis. But it's also being used in places like robots. The example that we have is that if you think about Amazon and its use of robots in terms of packing up all of those boxes that come to everybody's door every day, when Amazon first started working on robots to pick those items and put them in shipping boxes, the failure rates were high, and it took the robot like 2 minutes to make a successful pick of a good off of a shelf at the warehouse into the box and, out for shipping. Today, so, a few years later, the company's new robot, and they refer to it as Sparrow, can pick and pack up to 2/3 of the items of the 100 million products that are in a typical Amazon warehouse in just seconds for each. So that's just a dramatic example of how much those kinds of things have changed in the technology field, which is sort of where you would expect. But a less obvious area would be the grocery store and the food that we eat. Agriculture is undergoing a revolutionary change with using artificial intelligence with sort of this concept of what is known as precision agriculture, that, simply put, is just using high-tech tools to grow crops more efficiently. So if you're a farmer and you've got some cutting-edge technology that uses machine learning, geolocation, and sensors, you're able to make smarter decisions out there in the field as your crops are growing. And what some of the early reports show is that if you're in the farming business and you're using precision agriculture, or this concept of using artificial intelligence involving kind of monitoring things and geolocations and what's going on at every corner of the field, you're already seeing up to about 30% greater productivity with a reduction in the number of times you got to go back and forth on the field, and kind of improved soil. So this real-time data has allowed many farmers to be, I guess, increasingly reliant on things like analytics and visualizations to actually improve how you grow food and what we see at the grocery store. That's not a conversation about sort of the genetically modified plants or anything like that. This is just literally okay, this part of the field needs water, that part of the field doesn't need as much water. It's stuff like that that ultimately helps to increase productivity. And you're seeing that in good examples of that, even in places like agriculture. And of course, let's not forget healthcare, right? So AI certainly spawned an era of innovation in healthcare as well. There's no less than 10 pharmaceutical companies out there that have at least 125 new drugs in their R&D pipeline. Stop and think about that. That is a huge amount of pharmaceutical companies and an even larger amount of new drugs, new treatments that are pursuing these treatments and therapies to treat and cure a whole range of diseases. So things like cell therapy, which involves literally modifying cells outside the body and then infusing them back into you, or this gene silencing and splicing techniques that allow you to selectively suppress certain genes associated with certain diseases. It's really pretty impressive, and probably one of the biggest reasons why we think the markets are kind of performing in the manner that they are right now. And we think it's just another example in sort of that cycle, that we've seen over the course of the past 40 years. It started with computers. Then was the internet, and then, cell phones that, sort of come out of nowhere. But at the end of the day, they dramatically change how we do things. They dramatically change productivity, efficiency, and set the course for a continued cycle of economic growth. And folks, that's one of the biggest reasons why we've never been fans of selling the market, of shorting the market. Our clients and our investment advice for 40 years has been own companies, own the businesses that make the stuff that the world uses every day, because ultimately the economic cycle, human invention, those types of things ultimately continue to drive things going forward. Be an owner. Okay, ultimately, over time, you will be rewarded by owning the companies that are making the goods, the products, the services. And as the next big thing happens, that continues to push equity markets and company profitability further and further along. So I think the story about artificial intelligence is one that we're seeing, but we're not seeing, because it really is showing up in places that you would kind of least expect. So hopefully by giving you some of those examples that we have here on the program this week, you can kind of see where, okay, this really is kind of much more pervasive than we ever would have thought. Again, our example that I use all the time is that tax preparation software. I mean, that really is a version of artificial intelligence that is taking documents, reading them. I mean, the software is doing that, so that's not a human. That's why it's called artificial intelligence, and making sort of intelligent decisions as to what this data is all about and where it needs to go onto a tax return. And my goodness, I can tell you, the elimination of data input errors when you're preparing tax returns is just crucial, and it certainly has had the ability to do that. And because we back check it and test it and make sure, and yeah, it's not wrong yet. So it's pretty impressive stuff. So with that, we're going to slide to a break. Next up here on the program, Dollars and Cents, we're going to talk about home buying. And obviously, that's one of the biggest purchases that you're going to make in your lifetime. And the rules of the game have changed, and changed dramatically when it comes to home buying. So we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about that here on Dollars and Cents. We're certainly one of Central Florida's longest running radio programs. Our firm, Nelson Financial Planning, celebrating its 40th anniversary here coming right up on May 1 will be our 40th anniversary as a firm founded all those many years ago by my late late father-in-law, Jack Nelson. My name, of course, is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning. We'll continue after these messages here on Dollars and Cents. Buying a home, one of the biggest purchases that you will ever make in your lifetime. But the rules on home buying are changing, and it's based on not just one particular factor, but three unique factors that are occurring right now that are ultimately changing the rules of home buying. And we see the first one, particularly here in Florida, but it is a problem across the country, is this notion of higher insurance costs and homeowners insurance that is very difficult, if not in some cases impossible to get. The next factor is the economic factor, higher interest rates that have sort of defied expectations that they would start to fall earlier this year than what they appear currently on track to do. So interest rates have remained relatively high, and when you have high interest rates, that means that you can't afford as much of a mortgage or to borrow as much money as what you might have been able to 3 years ago when interest rates were at historical lows. And then the third factor, which is sort of the new wrinkle that rolled into the headlines this year, involves the means of purchasing. Sort of the transaction itself is about to change and is certainly in the process of changing dramatically this year as a result of the recent legal settlement by the National Association of Realtors. So that's a lot of different factors that are sort of coming together to ultimately change the rules of home buying. So in this segment, we're going to kind of talk about 4 different things that home buyers need to be aware of in this dramatically changing environment. So welcome on into Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. One of Central Florida's longest running radio program, coming to you on a host of stations throughout the Central Florida marketplace. Also one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web. So make sure you check us out on your favorite podcast platform. Once you're there, make sure you subscribe as well. That way you don't have to worry about finding us again. Plus, you'll get alerts whenever we upload new content. We've also, of course, got our YouTube channel. So if you want to see me in the Nelson Financial Planning Studios, which are a part of our office, well, then you can go to our YouTube channel at Nelson Financial Planning. Any trouble finding any of this stuff, go to our website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com. You'll see a bunch of icons. Click on those. They will immediately connect you over to the channel on whatever the particular platform is that you're looking to find us on. My name is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning, where we got a team of great folks who are also certified financial fiduciaries, and some of them are certified financial planners as well. Some of them are CPAs as well. Some of them are IRS enrolled agents. Some of them are national security advisors. You get the picture. It's a team approach at Nelson Financial Planning, where we stand ready, willing, and able to help you improve your finances this very week. So make sure you give us a call at the office, 407-629-6477, or visit our website, Nelson Financial Planning, to schedule that absolutely free conversation with us at any time. And when you do that, you come in for that free conversation, we give you a free copy of our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents. So a whole lot of good stuff can come your way just by picking up the phone or going on to the website and scheduling that. So you know the deal, right? On home buying, if you've bought a house or if you've sold a house, at some point there's a real estate commission that winds up typically coming into play, and so as the seller, you have an agent, and that's usually the listing agent. And then the person that comes up and is the buyer, they typically kind of have an agent as well. And so what had been happening for decades is that the typical price or the transaction costs was 6%. Well, if it's a $500,000 house, that's $30,000. That's a lot of money. All of that actually wound up coming out of the seller's pocket, typically in these kinds of transactions. So the seller, in essence, was paying the full 6% of the price that was the commission that ultimately was then getting split between sort of the buyer's agent and the seller's agent. I mean, that was the sort of the method where the seller and the buyer each had their own agent. But at the end of the day, it kind of came out of the seller's money, and it was a relatively high number at 6%. And that was the traditional platform for decades. Well, all of that is over, and it's over in June per the legal settlement by the National Association of Realtors. The settlement was done to sort of settle claims that the industry, the real estate agent industry, had conspired to keep agent commissions high. And as a result, now home sellers will have much more room to negotiate those fees. And we don't really know how all of this is going to completely shake out, but the bottom line is that it is going to change from what was the model for a long period of time. So the buyer may have to pay for their own agent out of pocket if they want representation. No longer is the seller going to feel like they've also got to compensate the buyer's agent. It's estimated that the costs that were typically 6% or 5% of that total purchase price may very well go down and range somewhere in a 3 to 4% range. That's a pretty significant savings, particularly if you are the seller of a property. And then you may see more sort of flat fee type structure or hourly rate or hourly fee type structure. You know, what's interesting about this is the kind of the same thing that happened in the financial services industry, except in the financial services industry, it happened 30 years ago. So I'm not sure why it's just finally getting to the real estate industry. But if you think back to the financial services industry 30 plus years ago, it was a heavy transaction type of structure, whereby when you were investing in a mutual fund, you paid a front-end load that was 5.75%. Isn't that interesting how close those numbers are? In a typical 6% on a real estate transaction, 5.75% to buy a fund. Now, this was, of course, 30 years ago, and as a result of the same kind of sets of circumstances, there was a lot of regulatory pressure, a lot of class action structure pressure. I mean, all of those kinds of things came and ultimately changed how business was done in the financial services industry as well. And so now the financial services industry operates much more in sort of a flat fee. You can even find hourly fee, or kind of more of an assets under management, kind of more of a ongoing form of compensation, and that form of compensation typically will range, well, unfortunately the industry at large hovers around north of 1%. We're usually much lower than that, but it just gives you an interesting perspective. And what strikes me about this conversation about the real estate market and what's going on in there is this is the same thing that played out 30 years ago in the financial services industry. And so ultimately, the notion that costs will go down for the consumer, yeah, that's what's going to happen. And that's certainly, there's a lot of precedent for that. So starting in July, so the settlement, the agreement that was reached by the National Association of Realtors, it's effective starting in July. So starting in July, most home buyers will have to sign agreements saying how much their agents are going to get paid. Definitely a changed environment from a transactional perspective. Bottom line, if you're in the home buying market, ask the question, get the information, get the details, and make sure that you understand sort of that the situation has changed and changed dramatically. So make sure you're taking the time to ask questions. We got some other thoughts in terms of some of the other things that are sort of the new rules of home buying in today's environment. And we're going to continue all of that conversation. But first, we got to take a break, and then we will return here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. About some of the new rules for home buying, and if you think about some of the things that have happened out there, a lot of it involving higher interest rates. It starts there, but the homeowners insurance issue is pretty significant, and we talk a lot about that here in Florida, but that actually is an issue across the country. And then you throw in the recent settlement by the National Association of Realtors that fundamentally changed the very transactional nature of home buying and home selling, then it's a new environment. So that if you're in that home buying environment or home selling environment, this part of the program, we're talking about some of the things that you need to sort of be aware of that have changed. Before the break, we were talking a little bit about the very nature of the transaction that has fundamentally changed as a result of this legal settlement by the National Association of Realtors that ultimately is going to shift away from that model where the seller paid both their agent and the buyer's agent. That was always kind of weird, right? As much as a 6%, probably going to see that either drop down or there being out-of-pocket expenses that the buyer needs to pay their agent, or folks work more on sort of a flat fee schedule or an hourly fee schedule, those kinds of things. Bottom line on that part, folks, is make sure you're asking the questions and you're getting all of the information, particularly if you're either a buyer or a seller of real estate in today's world. Now, mortgage rates certainly are on a lot of people's minds these days, particularly when we think about buying and selling a home. Let's face it, a good mortgage is kind of hard to find these days. And so what you would want to do is to make sure that you have a good understanding of what your reasonable expectation is going to be in terms of that mortgage rate. Certainly rates have kind of fallen from sort of that peak that they hit last year, but average mortgage rate in America, 30-year fix, is like still 6.74. So it's, I think at one point it was getting close to 8 last year. So it's drifted down from that, but not nearly as fast as sort of what was predicted in terms of interest rates. The traditional sort of other option that you would pick would be sort of an ARM rate, which is an adjustable rate mortgage where it's fixed for the first few years. But what's interesting there is there's not really a whole lot of difference in those rates versus the ARM rates versus the 30-year fixed. And so you have to really understand and appreciate the math. So if you've been in the market, maybe you've been kicking tires for a couple of years, the math is very different. And this is the part you need to understand on the mortgage side of things. So here's an easy example. If you can afford a $2,000 a month mortgage payment, then you could have a mortgage today of about $266. $266,000, that would be, nothing. You should pay that off in a month. But in contrast, 3 years ago, you would have been able to afford a $388,000 house. Stop and think about that. That's 45% more purchasing power with that $2,000 3 years ago than what you have today. And that is solely as a result of mortgage rates. Isn't that just, that's kind of incredible. That's a huge difference. And we're talking about purchasing power of that $2,000. So you would say, wait a minute, I thought my purchasing power was supposed to increase over time. Here we've got an example where it has actually shrunk, and it has shrunk pretty dramatically by almost half in terms of that $2,000 mortgage payment. Okay, yeah, 3 years ago, you could have gotten a $388,000 house. Today, you can only get a $266,000 house with that. That's pretty significant. So bottom line is make sure you know those numbers, right? If you're out there shopping around for a house, and take the time to shop around for the best mortgage rate. Now, the other issue that so many people are running into is this homeowners insurance. I guess this is our way of saying welcome to Florida. This one is usually been down the list for people, almost kind of like one of those things that, oh, okay, yeah, I'll get the homeowners insurance, and you usually deal with that, a few days prior to closing. You don't want to wait. Okay, because what's happening is, particularly here in Florida, a lot of insurance companies are leaving. They're going to require a 4-point inspection. They're only going to insure houses that are in apple pie order. If you've got bad electrical work, if you've got a bad roof, if you've got bad plumbing, all of those kinds of things, you may very well not be able to get homeowners insurance, and the bank is going to require that for your mortgage. So you may find your deal falling apart if you don't work at getting your homeowner's insurance much earlier and plan for it much earlier than you ever would. The reality is, getting your insurance company to kind of just issue you a policy because you're buying a house because, oh, this was the insurance company that I had for many years in my old house, or whatever the case may be, that is not going to happen. And this is not just a Florida problem. This is a nationwide problem. The average annual cost of homeowners insurance in America up to over $1,750 per year. That is up 23% from prior year. So again, different set of rules, particularly as it relates to home buying on the homeowner's insurance side of things. And then lastly, we'll throw in an additional debate of new construction versus existing. And obviously, new construction, if it's new construction, right, easier to get insurance. So that kind of goes hand in hand with that whole homeowner's insurance issue. But now sales are at the lowest level of existing homes in 20 years because so many people are holding on to those cheap mortgage rates of 3 years ago. So certainly have a little bit more of an opportunity to look at new home construction. In fact, that's what a lot of buyers are doing. 32% of homes for sale in the fourth quarter of last year were new construction versus only about 18% in the fourth quarter of 2021, 2 years older. Plus, 2 years earlier. Plus, builders have a tendency to kind of throw in sweeteners and to lure buyers. Maybe they lower the mortgage rates. Maybe they cover the closing costs. Maybe they give extra kinds of deals or incentives or whatnot. Bottom line on all this, folks, is that as with anything, okay, if you're out there in the home buying market or the home selling market, make sure you got a plan. That's crucial, right? As with anything, make sure that you have a plan. The rules and dynamics on this have changed significantly just over the past few months, so make sure you plan ahead. Get that pre-approval letter. Go in, make sure you know how much you're going to be able to get approved for on your mortgage with current mortgage rates as they are. You're going to be shocked to see how much your buying power has decreased as a result of that increase in interest rates. But make sure you get that pre-approval letter so that you're not blindsided on affordability and what you're actually able to pay for. Have that conversation with your insurance agent about how much you're going to pay for homeowners insurance, right? And whether you're going to be able to get a policy on the house that you are looking at buying. And then lastly, the transactional nature completely changed. Make sure you're having a conversation with your agent, whether you're the seller or the buyer. Make sure you're having an agent about how much they're going to get paid, how they're going to get paid, and who's going to pay them. So those are certainly some key takeaways if you're in the home buying or home selling market that you need to be aware of in today's world. So we're going to actually start to wrap it up because there's only a minute left in the program. We did not get to the purchases that people often regret in retirement. We're going to save that one for next week. So we'll start next week's program with that topic. We teased it at the top of the hour, but we just ran out of time in today's episode. So we hope you enjoyed this week's version of Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. If you're interested in learning more about any of the topics that we talked about, or would like a personal conversation about your finances, feel free to reach out to us courtesy of our website at nelsonfinancialplanning.com, or pick up the phone, give us a call, 407-629-6477. In a refreshing change of the current environment, you'll actually have a real person answer the phone. Isn't that great during normal business hours? So with that, we're going to wrap it on up and get on out of here. This is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning, and you've been listening to Dollars and Cents.